The night she came in, I had 4 units of compact standard O-negative in the cold locker, 2 functioning pressure cuffs, and a station medic assistant named Corvath who had worked with me for 6 years, and who was, at that moment, 50 meters away in the outer bay repairing a filtration seal that could not wait. I was alone. She had been carried in by 2 Velsorath soldiers who set her on the intake table, and then stood back with their hands at their sides in the way that soldiers do when they have run as far as they can run, and there is nothing left to carry. One of them had a pressure wrap around his forearm that was leaking through. The other had nothing wrong with her that I could see, which meant her injuries were internal, which meant she had been running on will alone for however long it had taken them to get here. The woman on the table was not moving. I did not ask names. I do not ask names when someone is that color. The Velsorath do not read as human, but they are close enough that the vital signs make sense to someone who has been doing trauma work on border moons for 11 years. Her skin tone, a deep copper bronze, the kind that catches light like old metal when the person is healthy, had gone the wrong direction. She was too cool. Her breathing was shallow enough that I had to watch for a full 4 seconds to confirm she was doing it at all. I got her on continuous monitoring and started a primary assessment and found the problem inside the first 90 seconds, penetrating abdominal trauma, left side bleed that had been packing itself against a rib and slowly losing that fight. Whoever had field dressed it had done competent work. It had not been enough. I needed blood. The station's supply was compact standard, O-negative human. I had 4 units in the cold locker because this was a border installation and border installations run lean. I did not have Velsorath match product. The nearest facility that might have it was 4 hours at hard burn, and she did not have 4 hours. She did not have 1 hour. She might have had 40 minutes if I did not get a line in her and started replacing what she was losing. I will tell you what I knew at the time and what I did not know, because the difference matters. What I knew, Velsorath baseline biology is close enough to human that emergency cross-species transfusion has been documented in the literature going back 60 years. It is not standard practice. It carries risks. The cascade effects are unpredictable and in some individuals severe. But the literature is clear that it has been done, and that it has, in approximately 70% of documented cases, bought enough time to stabilize until matched product could be obtained. 70% is not a certainty. It is also not nothing when the alternative is watching someone die on your table because you were too cautious to try. What I did not know, the Velsorath warrior caste has a body of law so old that most of it predates their current government by 800 years. Some of it is ceremonial. Some of it has real teeth. One provision, Article 14 of the Velsorath Warrior Compact, a document I had never read and had no reason to have read, governs what happens when a warrior of the caste receives blood from an outsider in conditions of mortal emergency. The provision was written in a time when warrior caste members were sometimes the only survivors of battlefield disasters, when they were sometimes found and tended by people not of the caste, when the question of what obligation ran between a life given and a life preserved needed a legal answer. The answer the law gave was this: blood freely given in mortal emergency binds the giver to the recipient's lineage at the cellular level, and if the recipient's body accepts the foreign blood without rejection, a biological event that is recorded in the recipient's own cells and cannot be falsified, then the giver is recognized as Velsorath Keth, a bonded member of the warrior line by act of blood, carrying all rights and obligations that attach to that standing, including the obligation of issue. If the recipient subsequently bore a child, the child's lineage recorded both the warrior parent and the Velsorath Keth parent. I did not know any of this when I put the line in. I ran the first unit at the rate she needed and monitored for cascade. There was a brief window of elevated temperature, a slight inflammatory response that I treated and that resolved. The second unit went in without incident. Her pressure started coming back. By the third unit, she was breathing at a rate that looked like someone fighting to stay alive rather than someone losing that fight, which is a distinction you learn to read when you have been doing this long enough. The taller soldier, the one with the wrapped forearm, said something in Velsorath that I did not catch, and the other soldier answered in trade common. She is the third daughter of House Velsorath. She was coming back from the negotiation at Keth Varun when the faction ambush hit the transport. I don't need the politics, I said. I need to know if she has any documented drug sensitivities. A pause, none on record. I ran the fourth unit. Her color was coming back slowly, the copper bronze warming from underneath the way a forge warms before it glows. The bleeding from the site had slowed enough that I could close it properly. Korvath came in from the outer bay somewhere around the second hour and took over monitoring while I worked, and we did not speak much because there was not much to say. We had done this before, the two of us, in rooms like this one, and the conversation in those rooms is mostly hands and instruments and the particular silence of people concentrating. By the fourth hour she was stable. By the sixth hour she was conscious. She did not speak to me at first. She looked at the ceiling with her pale amber eyes open and very still, and I recognized that look because I have seen it on soldiers and contractors and survey workers who have come close enough to the edge that they are still measuring the distance back. I let her look at the ceiling. Korvath left a cup of water within reach and did not make a production of it. When she finally turned her head and looked at me, she did not say thank you. She said, in trade common with the careful deliberateness of someone who has spoken it long enough to choose words precisely, "What did you use?" I told her. She was quiet for a long time after that. "Human blood," she said. "Compact O-negative. I didn't have matched Velsorath product and you were bleeding out. The cross-species literature gave me better odds than watching you die." She looked at the ceiling again. Her jaw was set in a way that I had learned, over 11 years on border installations, to read as someone processing information that they do not have a prepared response for. "Is it a problem?" I said. "It may become one," she said. "What is your name?" I told her that too. "Sarin Vale," she repeated, the way people repeat a name when they are filing it somewhere specific. "You are a medic." "Civilian contractor, Compact Medical Corps affiliate. I'm the only trauma-trained person at this station most days." "You did not ask who I was before you gave the blood." "You were dying. It didn't seem like the relevant question." She turned her head back toward me. The amber eyes were steadier now. The shock was receding, and something more considered was taking its place. "No," she said, "I suppose it did not." She did not explain the remark. I did not press it. She slept through most of the next 2 days, which was the right thing to do, and I monitored her and ran the standard follow-up work and found no cascade effects beyond what I had already treated. The cross-species transfusion had, by every clinical measure I could apply, worked cleanly. The soldiers stayed. They slept in the outer bay on folded thermal blankets and ate from the station's provisions, and did not ask for anything they were not given. The one with the wrapped forearm, she told me her name was Sorvith, let me redress the wound on the second day and did not flinch, which told me she was either very controlled or in less pain than she was letting on, and with Velsorath warriors it is usually both. I learned in those early days what Velsorath recovery looked like from the outside. It is not like human recovery. There is less of the gradual restoration of ordinary demeanor, the tentative humor, the returning appetite, the visible relaxation as pain recedes, and more of a quality I can only describe as recalibration. She was assessing herself methodically each hour, not anxiously, not despairingly, with the precision of someone who needs accurate information about their own condition and is capable of gathering it without distortion. She did not complain. She did not perform comfort. She simply reported when I asked and otherwise directed her attention where she chose to direct it. On the third day, Ethan Velsorath sat up without assistance and asked for something to read. I gave her the compact border installation operations manual because it was the nearest thing to hand, and she read it in what appeared to be a single sitting, with the focused attention of someone who considers reading an operational task rather than a leisure activity. I found this somehow more unsettling than any of the rest of it. You expect, when someone has been bleeding out on your table 3 days ago, that they will spend their recovery looking out windows or sleeping. You do not expect them to be taking notes in the margins of your operations manual. Your filtration maintenance schedule is behind, she said, on the afternoon of the third day. Korvath's working on it. Section 12 of this manual specifies a 14-day cycle. Your log shows the last full cycle was 22 days ago. We've had a busy month. She looked at me with the amber eyes in a way that made me feel I had said something slightly foolish, without being sure exactly what it was. I am not criticizing, she said. I am noting the difference matters. I'll take that under advisement, I said. She almost smiled. It was a small thing, the corner of her mouth, a slight change in the set of her jaw, and it was gone quickly. But I noted it because it was the first time I had seen it, and the first time is always the one you remember. What I did not know, still, was that on the 4th day after the transfusion, a routine biological log that the Velsorath warrior caste maintains on all active members had flagged. The flag was automatic. It had been triggered by the cellular markers that the transfusion had left in her system, markers that the old law recognized, that the old law was designed to recognize. Because the people who wrote the old law had understood that a body under mortal stress has a different relationship to what it accepts than a body in ordinary health. Her cells had not merely tolerated the foreign blood. They had incorporated it at a level that the law called acceptance. They had done what the law said they would do when the conditions were met. The flag reached her house's administrative record on the 5th day. The delegation arrived at the station on the 7th. There were 4 of them. 3 were administrative staff in formal house livery, deep gray with the copper thread at the collar that marks Velsorath rank. The 4th was an advocate, a man named Velkorath Dune, who had the particular quality of stillness that comes with someone who has spent a professional lifetime looking for angles and finding them. I was in the outer bay when they arrived. Korvath came and found me, and I could tell from the way he walked that whatever was happening was not routine. They're asking for her, Korvath said, and they're asking about you. I went in. Ethan was sitting upright on the recovery bench. She was dressed in the clothes that Sorvath had retrieved from the transport wreckage, plain gray travel clothes, practical and unornamented, nothing that would identify her rank to someone who did not already know it. She was watching the delegation with the same focused stillness with which she had read the operations manual, and I recognized it now as a working expression, not a resting one. The advocate looked at me. You are Soren Vale, the medic who treated the patient. I am. You administered human blood product to a Velsorath warrior caste member in trauma conditions on the 8th day of the 3rd month. I did. She was bleeding out. It was the intervention available. You were aware of the warrior caste biological bonding provision under Article 14 of the Velsorath Warrior Compact. I looked at him, I looked at Ethan. Her expression had not changed. I was not, I said. You are aware of it now, he said, and handed me a document. I read it. It took me a few minutes, because the language was formal and layered in the way that very old law is layered, the kind of language that has been added to in increments over centuries, each generation of legal scholars tucking their annotations into the body of the original text, until the original and the commentary are inseparable. I read it once for the surface of it and then again for the weight of it, and with each pass I understood more precisely what it meant and what it did not mean and what it required. Part of my mind was occupied throughout, with the slow understanding that this was the thing she had meant 3 days ago when she had said it may become one. I had not pressed her for the answer then, because the question had seemed like something she needed to hold at her own pace, and I had respected that without knowing what I was respecting. I set the document down on the instrument bench, and I looked at her. She was still watching me. The amber eyes had not moved from my face in the entire time I was reading, and I understood that she had been watching to see what I would do with the information, not the legal information, but the information about her, about the fact that she had known and waited and determined. "You knew," I said. "It was not an accusation, it was a factual observation." "I knew the law existed," she said. "I did not know, at the moment you gave the blood, whether my body would accept it under the provision's terms. The acceptance is biological, not chosen. It either occurs or it does not." "And it occurred?" "Yes." "When were you going to tell me?" "I was determining," she said carefully, "what I wanted to do about it." The advocate cleared his throat. "The House of Velsorath's position is that this bond, while technically activated under the provision, was entered into without the full knowledge of either party and should be administratively dissolved as a matter of. The provision does not have an administrative dissolution mechanism," Ethan said. A pause. "The House is prepared to pursue a precedent-setting challenge before the Caste Council." "The House can pursue whatever it likes," Ethan said. "The question before this room is not what the House wants. The question is what Article 14 requires, and what I choose." The advocate's stillness took on a different quality. "You are the third daughter of House Velsorath in a disputed line succession. You are here on a border installation because the primary line sent a faction extraction team to remove you from the Keth Varun negotiation. You are not in a position—" "I am a Velsorath warrior," she said, and the copper bronze of her was very still and very steady, and the amber eyes did not move from the advocate's face. "The provision under which this bond was activated applies to Velsorath warriors. My standing under it is not contingent on the House's approval of my succession position." The advocate looked at his papers. The 3 administrative staff behind him said nothing. I said, "What does it mean for me, in practical terms?" Ethan looked at me. The first time I had spoken directly to her in front of these people, and she absorbed it the way she absorbed everything, fully, without hurry. "It means," she said, "that under the warrior compact you are Velsorath Keth to this house. You are bonded to the lineage by the act of blood given in my emergency. The house cannot erase that without your consent and mine, and neither of us was asked before they arrived here with papers." "Is it?" I looked at the document again. "It says if the recipient subsequently bears a child." "Yes," she said. I looked at her. "Yes," she said again, more quietly. "I became aware of it 4 days ago. I was still determining." The room was very quiet. I have been a trauma medic for 11 years. I have worked in places where the gap between the moment of action and the moment of understanding what you did can be measured in days, in physiological consequences that do not announce themselves until the crisis is past. I know how to stay functional in that gap. I know how to hold the understanding at arm's length long enough to do what needs to be done. What I found, sitting in that quiet room on a border moon with a document in my hand, and a woman looking at me with amber eyes that were not performing anything at all, was that I did not want to hold this one at arm's length. I put the document back down. "What do you want?" I said to her, not to the advocate, not to the administrative staff, to her. She looked at me for a long moment. The window above the recovery bench let in the pale daylight of Velsorath IV's short morning, and it caught the copper of her skin the way I had seen it warming on that first night, from the inside out, the color returning with the blood. "I was told growing up," she said, "that the warrior compact's bonding provision was obsolete, that it had not been invoked in 400 years, that it was kept in the law only because removing it would require a caste council vote that no one wanted to convene. She paused. I was not told that it was written the way it was written, because the people who wrote it understood something that my house has apparently forgotten. What did they understand? That when someone gives you their blood to keep you alive, she said, and asks nothing in return except that you do not die, that is not a transaction. That is a different kind of thing entirely. The old law was trying to name it. The advocate made a sound that was the beginning of a sentence. Ethan raised one hand, palm out, in a gesture that stopped him as cleanly as a wall. I will need to file a formal statement of recognition, she said. She was looking at me when she said it, not at him. Under Article 14, the Velsorath Keth must be named by the recipient before the caste record. It is the recipient's act, not the house's. She paused. I am prepared to make it now before these witnesses. Ethan, the advocate began. You are here to serve the house's interest, she said. You are not here to advise me on mine. If the House wishes to challenge the provision before the caste council, it may do so after the record is made. The sequence matters. Article 14 is explicit on the sequence. She looked at me. Soren Vale, she said, and her voice had shifted register, not louder, not harder, but grounded in a way that the formal words require a grounded voice to carry. I am Ethan Velsorath, third daughter of the warrior house Velsorath, caste standing active, speaking before witnesses in the station of my emergency and recovery. She paused. What she was doing, I would learn later, required the recipient to speak the Velsorathketh's name 3 times in the formal address form, with each repetition adding a layer of the recognition. The first naming acknowledged the act. The second named the person. The third bound the record. I name you as the one who gave blood freely in my mortal emergency, she said. I name you as a man who did not ask who I was before he acted, because the question before him was not who I was, but whether I would live. The second naming. I name you as Velsorath Keth to this house and to my lineage. The blood you gave was given without condition. The acceptance my body made was without coercion. The provision exists because the people who wrote it knew that a life given freely and accepted fully is a bond that law should name rather than ignore. The third naming. Soren Vale. By the Velsorath Warrior Compact, Article 14, in the full terms of the provision before these witnesses, I name you as Velsorath Keth, as the acknowledged blood bond of this line, and as the second parent of the child of this lineage. This naming is my act and my choice, made in full knowledge of its terms without compulsion and without administrative dissolution available after the fact. She lowered her hand. The advocate was very still. I was very still. She looked at me and the amber eyes were calm, not cold, but settled the way a person is settled when they have said the true thing out loud and there is nothing left to conceal. I should have told you sooner, she said, in a register that was her own voice and not the formal one. I was determining. I had not been certain until I watched you read that document and put it back down without backing away from it, what kind of person you were. And now you're certain, I said. You did not flinch, she said. You asked what I wanted. Not what the law required of you, not what it meant for your contractor standing, not whether you could challenge the provision's applicability. You asked what I wanted. A pause. The last person who asked me that, without an agenda attached to the asking, was my mother. She has been dead for 6 years. I did not know what to say to that. I said nothing, which I have found, in 11 years of sitting with people in the aftermath of the worst things that have happened to them, is often the right response. The House will challenge, she said, returning to the level tone that meant she was thinking operationally. They will argue the blood was given without informed consent to the provision's terms, and that the Velsorathketh standing cannot attach to an act performed in ignorance of its legal consequences. It is the best argument they have. Is it a good argument? The precedents are 400 years old. The caste council will have to convene. A slight pause. I intend to be present at the convening, with you if you are willing. I'm a civilian contractor on a border installation, I said. I have no standing in a Velsorath caste council proceeding. You have Velsorathketh standing, she said. Article 14 grants it. That is precisely why the House's challenge is motivated. They would prefer you have no standing before the council, because Velsorathketh standing gives you the right to speak to the provision's terms in your own voice, and the council is required to hear it. The advocate said something to one of the administrative staff in Velsorath that I did not catch. Ethan did not look at him. What I am asking you, she said, is whether you are willing to go before the caste council and say that you gave blood to keep someone alive, and that you would do it again, and that you do not consider the consequences of that act to be a mistake. I thought about the night she came in, the 4 units in the cold locker, the color of her going wrong, the arithmetic of 70% against watching her die. That's what happened, I said. I'd tell it the same way to any council. Yes, she said, I know. She turned to the advocate. The naming is made and witnessed. The record will be filed with the caste administrative office by close of the current period. I suggest the House's legal staff review the full text of Article 14 before advising the challenge, because the section on administrative dissolution that they are intending to invoke was repealed in the 3rd reformulation. It no longer exists. She paused. I had time to read the full text. The advocate looked at her for a long moment. He closed the document case with the particular care of someone who is recalibrating. We will relay the House's position, he said. You may do so, she said. I will be here until I am medically cleared for transit. My medic will advise me on the timeline. They left, all 4 of them, through the station's outer bay, back to whatever transport had brought them. Sorvith watched them go from the doorway with the expression of someone who has been waiting for this particular departure for a long time. When the outer bay door closed, the room was quiet except for the background hum of the filtration system that Korvath had repaired, which I noted was now running at the correct cycle interval. I sat down on the stool beside the instrument bench. The child, I said, you are certain. The station's own scanner confirmed it 2 days ago. I used the equipment in the early morning. I did not ask Korvath to run the panel because I wanted to be certain myself before I told anyone. A pause. I have been certain for 48 hours. How far? 6 weeks at most. The timing is consistent with the transfusion event. I looked at the instrument bench. The scanner sat on it quiet, doing nothing in particular. I don't know anything about Velsorath pregnancy, I said. I will teach you what I know, she said. Some of it will require you to read documents that are not as accessible as an operations manual. I will help you locate them. Something in the way she said this, the absolute matter-of-factness of it, the implicit assumption that we would be in the same location long enough for me to read documents she helped me locate, sat in my chest in a way I did not immediately have words for. You want to stay, I said. This installation has a qualified trauma medic, she said, a functioning medical bay, and a filtration system that is now operating on schedule. It is on a contested border moon, which is relevant to my work, and the man who kept me alive is here. She looked at me steadily. I have been exiled from the primary house for 2 years over the succession dispute. I have been living on transport vessels and transit accommodations and borrowed administrative clearance. I have been determining, since the ambush at Keth Varun, whether there is a place in this region where I could stop determining and simply be in a place. And you think this is it? I think, she said, that a man who asks what I want rather than what the law requires, and who would give blood to a stranger because she was dying, and who sat down on a stool after hearing that he is Velsorath Keth to a warrior house, and the second parent of a child he did not know he was going to be, and did not run, is the kind of person next to whom a place can be a place. She was watching me with the amber eyes. I am not romantic, she said. I want to be accurate about that. I am telling you a practical thing. You are the kind of person I would choose to be near if I were choosing. I am choosing now, in case the distinction matters to you. The distinction matters, I said. Good, she said. Then we are in agreement about what this is. I have been a trauma medic for 11 years. I have seen the full range of what the human body can do and cannot do, and the range of what the bodies of the species I have worked alongside can do and cannot do. I have spent more time than I can account for in rooms that smell of antiseptic and recycled air, watching monitors and running assessments, and making the calibrated decisions of a person who has been taught that precision and speed are the same thing at a certain threshold. I have not, in 11 years, been in a room where a woman told me I was the kind of person next to whom a place can be a place. I did not know what to do with that in the way that you know what to do with a bleeding wound or a pressure spike or a cascade response. There are no protocols for it. There is no training course. There is only the choice of whether to stay in the room or leave it, and I had, apparently, already made that choice by sitting down on the stool. The cast council, I said, when will it convene? Within 30 days of the House filing the challenge. They are required to convene within that window. A pause. The session will be at the Velsorath Primary Court. I will need to travel. You will need to come with me if you intend to speak under Velsorath Keth standing. I've never been to a Velsorath cast court. I will prepare you. The formal address forms are not difficult. The protocol for Velsorath Keth speaking under Article 14 has not been invoked in 400 years. Which means the council has not adjudicated it in living memory, which means you will need to be precise, but they will not be expecting precision. The gap works in our favor. I thought about the operations manual with her notes in the margins. I thought about the way she had read the advocate's document before he had finished handing it to her. You've been preparing for this, I said. For 3 days, she said. Since I understood that the acceptance had occurred and the provision would apply. I had 2 possible outcomes. The House would not challenge, in which case no preparation was required, or the House would challenge, in which case I needed to know the full text of Article 14, the relevant precedents, the Council's procedural rules, and the exact sequence of the naming. A pause. I prefer to be prepared. I noticed, I said. She did almost smile again. The same small thing, corner of the mouth, the set of the jaw shifting, and this time it lasted a few seconds longer before she brought it back. You will need someone to run this station while we travel, she said. Korvath. Korvath has been running it without me before, I said. He's better at the filtration schedule than I am. I noticed, she said. Sorvath appeared in the doorway of the recovery room. She looked at Ethan, and then at me, and then back at Ethan, with the expression of someone who has been waiting for a conversation to conclude. They are gone, Sorvath said. Yes, Ethan said. We will be ready to travel in 9 days. I need to be medically cleared. Sorvath looked at me. 9 days, I said. If recovery continues at the current rate, possibly 8. Sorvath made a sound that was not quite an acknowledgement and not quite a question, and went back to the outer bay. The station was quiet in the way that stations on contested border moons are quiet when the immediate crisis has passed, and the next one has not yet arrived. The filtration hum. The monitor ticking along at the baseline it was supposed to tick along at. The pale morning light through the window. I sat on the stool for a while longer. The child, I said. In Velsorath, what is the how do you? It is a long pregnancy by human standards, she said. 14 months. The child will carry both lineages in the biological record. That is what Article 14 was designed to ensure, that a child born of a blood bond is not recorded as belonging only to the warrior parent. Both lines are in the record. Both parents are acknowledged. She paused. The child will have rights under the Velsorath Warrior Compact that the House would prefer not to exist. That is, ultimately, what the challenge is about. Not the bond itself. The succession implications of a child, with Velsorathketh standing. Your succession position. My succession position becomes considerably more complex when there is a child withstanding in both the Warrior Compact and, by extension, the Compact Medical Service, given your contractor affiliation. She looked at me with something that might have been, in a different person, a hint of dry amusement. You did not intend to complicate the Velsorath succession. I intended to keep you alive, I said. Yes, she said. I know. That is the part that the old law was trying to name. I went back to work after that, because the station does not stop needing work because unusual things have happened in the medical bay. Korvath came and found me in the supply corridor and asked, with the particular economy of a person who knows when a question is warranted and when it is not, whether everything was resolved. Mostly, I said. The delegate team, he said, will be filing a caste council challenge. We'll need to travel in 9 days. He absorbed this. The patient is coming with us. The patient is Ethan Velsorath, third daughter of the warrior house, Velsorathketh bond formalized. And yes, she is coming with us. Korvath was quiet for a moment with the manner of a person, integrating a significant amount of information that they were not prepared to process in a single step. The filtration cycle, he said finally, I can maintain it. I know, I said. She noticed it was on schedule. She said so. He looked at me with an expression I could not fully read, and then he went back to the outer bay. The council convened 26 days later at the Velsorath Primary Court, which is on the second moon of the Velsorath home system, in a chamber that has been used for caste proceedings for longer than most governments in this region have existed. The chamber is stone, mostly, with the kind of density that tells you the building was not designed to be impressive, but has become impressive simply by surviving. The benches are worn smooth in the middle of each seat from centuries of people sitting in them. The lighting comes from windows cut at deliberate angles, so the illumination is even regardless of the sun's position. Those 26 days were the most education-dense period of my adult life. I had read the operations manual front to back 4 times, out of professional habit, and considered myself conversant with it. Reading caste law with Ethan Velsorath as the instructor was a different order of experience. She did not simplify. She assumed you were capable of handling the full complexity of a thing if you were given sufficient time and a well-organized presentation of the relevant material. She was right about both assumptions. We sat at the station's secondary terminal most evenings, after the day's medical work was done and Sorvath had taken over the outer bay watch, and she walked me through the caste council's procedural rules and the Article 14 precedents, and the specific weaknesses in the House's challenge. She annotated documents and then handed them to me, and I annotated them further, and she read my annotations and corrected my errors and confirmed the things I had understood correctly. It was not, I recognized slowly, that different from the way I train a junior medic in a new procedure. Methodical, patient, precise, with the assumption that competence is achievable if approached correctly. Korvath said nothing about any of it, which was typical of Korvath. He ran the station. He kept the filtration on schedule. He made tea at the correct intervals and left it on the secondary terminal without comment. I had read every document Ethan had given me. I had practiced the formal address form until I could deliver it without hesitation. I had read the full text of Article 14 and the relevant precedents and the Council's procedural rules. I was, I will admit, nervous in a way I am not usually nervous. I am accustomed to high-stakes environments. I am not accustomed to high-stakes environments in which the stakes are the acknowledgement of a child I did not know I was going to be a parent to 3 weeks ago. Ethan sat beside me at the respondent's bench. She was in formal Velsorath warrior attire, a deep copper gray that matched the thread color of the house livery, but in the plainer cut that the warrior compact's formal dress code specifies, without the ornamentation that the administrative house would have used. Sorvith was behind us. The house's advocate sat at the opposing bench with 3 of the administrative staff and 2 legal specialists. The council chair, an older woman with the careful posture of someone who has been listening to arguments for a long time and has developed an efficient method for identifying their weaknesses. Read the challenge document and then set it down. The House's position, she said, is that the Velsorath bond under Article 14 cannot attach to an act performed without the bonding party's knowledge of the provision's terms. Is that an accurate summary? The advocate confirmed it. The respondent's position. Ethan spoke first. She stated her standing. She stated the facts of the emergency. She stated that the biological acceptance had occurred and was recorded in her own cells and could not be disputed. She stated that Article 14 does not require the Velsorath to have knowledge of the provision's terms at the time of the act, because the provision was designed for conditions in which the bonding party was not a caste member and could not be expected to know caste law. Then she said, "The Velsorath is present and prepared to speak under the provision standing." The council chair looked at me. I stood. I delivered the formal address form exactly as I had practiced it. It is a short form, 7 lines, each one specifying a different aspect of the Velsorath standing and intention. I had practiced it until the language was in my mouth, the way a clinical procedure is in your hands after enough repetitions. Not automatic, but available, present at need without the overhead of retrieval. Then I said what Ethan had asked me to say, in my own words without the formality. That I gave blood to keep someone alive, that I did not ask who she was before I acted, that I would do it again, and that I did not consider the consequences of that act to be a mistake. The council chair looked at me for a moment after I said it. Not in the way that a judge looks at a witness they are preparing to challenge, but in the way that someone looks at a thing they have not seen before and are deciding how to categorize. "You were aware," she said, "that cross-species transfusion carries documented risks." "Yes." "And you assessed those risks against the alternative." "Against watching her die because I was too cautious to try." "Yes." The chamber was quiet when I sat back down. The advocate made his argument. The legal specialists cited the passages they had found. Ethan answered each citation with the counter passage she had located in the 3 weeks of preparation. She was precise. She was complete. She was, I understood watching her work, the most prepared person in the room, and the council chair understood this too, because the chair's questions shifted gradually from the advocate to Ethan, and the tone of them shifted with it. The council deliberated for 2 hours. The ruling was that the Velsorath bond under Article 14 was validly activated, that the formal naming had been made in the correct sequence and before sufficient witnesses, and that the challenge did not present grounds sufficient to dissolve a provision whose terms were clearly met. The child's lineage would be recorded under both lines in the Warrior Compact's register, with full standing on both sides. The advocate gathered his papers. The legal specialists did not look at us. Ethan sat still beside me in the worn stone chamber until the council members had filed out, and then she was still for a moment longer, looking at the empty benches across the room with the expression of someone who has been carrying a weight and is assessing whether to believe yet that it has been set down. I did not say anything. I had learned, over the previous 26 days of preparing documents and reading, caste law and sitting in a station on a border moon with a woman who annotated everything she read, that she preferred to complete her own assessments before the conversation resumed. "It is done," she said finally. Yes, I said. She turned and looked at me. The amber eyes in the even light of the stone chamber, the copper bronze of her steady in the way she was always steady, the particular quality of her attention that I had learned to recognize as what it actually was, a person taking someone seriously. The station, she said, I would like to go back to it. Korvath will have the filtration on schedule, I said. She stood. Sorvith came forward from the back of the chamber. The three of us walked out of the Velsorath primary court into the morning of the second moon, which was clear and cold and very bright. I do not have a word for what I felt then. That is not also the word for what I have felt in the particular moments after a stabilization holds. When you have done everything you could do, and the person on the table is still breathing, and the monitor is ticking along at the baseline it is supposed to tick along at, and the weight of the previous hours has not lifted, but has shifted into something you can carry forward rather than something you are fighting against. It is not happiness exactly. It is something more durable than happiness. It is the knowledge that the thing you did was worth doing, and that the consequences of it, however unexpected, are real and present and yours. Ethan stopped at the top of the steps that led down from the court to the transit platform. She did not look at me, but she stopped in a way that made clear she was aware of where I was. Sarenvale, she said. Yes. The child will need a name, she said. In the Velsorath Warrior Compact, the Velsorathketh parent names the child for the compact register. It is considered the Bonded Parents Act. I looked at the clear, cold sky of the second moon, which was not a sky I had expected to be standing under a month ago. I'll need some time to think about it, I said. You have 12 months, she said. That should be enough, I said. She went down the steps. Sorvith followed. I stood for a moment at the top, looking at the transit platform below and the border transport that would take us back to the station, and then I went down after them, because the station was where we were going, and the station was, it appeared, where I was going to be. The child was born 13.5 months later in the station's medical bay, which I had by then upgraded with matched Velsorath equipment, because I had applied for the materials through the Velsorathketh Provisions Logistical Support Clause, which I had read about in the appendix of Article 14, and which the Compact Medical Corps had been surprised but not unwilling to accommodate. Sorvith was there. Korvath was there. I was there. Ethan named the child in the Velsorath form, the warrior name, the lineage name, the house acknowledgement, and then she looked at me with the amber eyes that I had watched change over 13 months from the guarded stillness of someone who is still measuring the distance back from the edge to the steady presence of someone who has stopped measuring. Your turn, she said. I spoke the name I had chosen into the compact register, which Korvath had queued up on the station's administrative terminal. It was a plain name. It carried nothing except the sound of it and the intention with which it was given. Ethan listened to it. She looked down at the child and then back at me. Still correct, she said, in the same register she had used 13 months ago in a cold humanitarian mess hall. No, that was a different story. That was Dove and Kale. What she said was this. I chose well, she said. The filtration system hummed at the correct cycle interval. The monitor ticked along at the baseline. Outside the window of the medical bay, the border moon's morning was coming in, pale and ordinary and exactly the right kind of light.